The Boston Bruins left some points on the table in California, and they're running the risk of not only wasting one of David Pastrnak's prime years, but also some elite scoring from Morgan Geekie.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans? Welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today is Monday, November 24th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. And on today's episode, we are going to discuss weekend split against the Los Angeles Kings and the San Jose Sharks. The Bruins coming out of this 3-game California tour with only 2 points. Morgan Geekie legitimately carrying the offense with all but one of the goals scored over those 3 games. We'll discuss why the Bruins lost, way too many penalties, and where they stand here just a few days before Thanksgiving, which is a general marking point for serious playoff contending teams. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on socials at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, even TikTok. You can find me at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been hosting this podcast for about 6 years and been covering this team for various outlets, as well as the NHL at large, for nearly 20 years now. So the Boston Bruins last night losing to the San Jose Sharks, and a few reasons for that. One of which being just way too much time spent in the penalty box. The Bruins took 6 minor penalties last night against the San Jose Sharks, and head coach Marco Sturm after the game said 6 penalties a night, it's going to make for a hard season. Players are too good, too skilled on the power play these days, and the fact is you get out of your rhythm if you're always trying to kill penalties, right? Like, you can't consistently get your lines out, get some offensive zone pressure, some cycling, some opportunities, if it's being interrupted by whistles, by being called for trips, by having your penalty kill unit out there 6 times in one game. Now, the Bruins did have some offensive opportunities in this game. They got 1 goal from Morgan Geekie. We'll discuss him later in the podcast. But when they did get some momentum going, to their credit, the San Jose Sharks got amazing goaltending from Yaroslav Askarov, who really lifted his team out of potential momentum shifting opportunities. But the reality is you cannot take that many penalties. The guys that played, Marco Sturm said they tried everything they possibly could to generate offense, to keep the Sharks off the scoreboard. And to Boston's credit, they only allowed 1 power play goal on those 6 opportunities. But they were down 2-0, and they were facing a hot goalie. Didn't do good enough job in front of him, Sturm said, and it's unfortunate to leave points here. Macklin Celebrini's power play goal made it 2-0 at around 11:45 of the second period, and that was it. Morgan Geekie scored his 5th goal in 3 games to get the Bruins on the board in the third, but that was all that they could manage, despite some pretty nice opportunities on Askarov, who again stood very tall. And the penalty thing is a real problem for the Boston Bruins. They have taken 125 penalties so far through 24 games. And they are averaging 12 minutes and 50 seconds of penalties through 24 games, which is second only to the Calgary Flames, who have 12 minutes, 57 seconds. Total penalty minutes, the Bruins are at 308. The Flames are at 311. Third place team is Chicago, who is at 267. So you can see the disparity there. Now, the Bruins' net penalty rating as well is tied for the league worst with the Chicago Blackhawks. And that is penalties drawn against penalties taken. They've taken 16 more penalties than they have drawn. This is a problem for this team. When it comes to minor penalties, 110 minors compared to only 88 for the Montreal Canadiens, who have the second most. That's 22 more minor penalties taken than the next most egregious team. They've also had 10 majors, which puts them tied for the most. You can't sustain this. You cannot be consistently putting your team at a disadvantage, because we know that, again, as Sturm said, teams are very good on the power play. You get all your star players out there at once. You're a man down. Like, it's not rocket science here. If you are playing a man down and giving the other team an opportunity to load up with their best offensive players on the ice 4, 5, 6 times a night, then it's going to be very hard to win consistently. And that was the problem last night for the Bruins. They had their opportunities. Askarov could not be beat. He made an amazing save on David Pastrnak right before Celebrini scored, I believe. Celebrini, an all-world talent. The Bruins were just out-goalied and handed the Sharks several opportunities to score on the power play. Yeah, they were able to kill 5 of 6, but at the same time, you just can't take that many penalties in a game and expect to come out with a win. So that's a real problem. The Bruins need to tighten up in terms of their discipline. Morgan Geekie, 17 goals on the year. We'll discuss him again coming up. The Bruins leaving points on the table is an issue here. David Pastrnak afterwards said it's a California trip, always low-scoring games, one of the toughest trips. They prepare, they bear down, try to bury your chances when you can. They came up short, and Elias Lindholm, who made his return to the lineup for the first time since October 30th, after dealing with a lower body injury, finished the night with about 15:41 of ice time, said it was good to be back. One of those games where you try to get the rhythm going and do the best you can, but that's difficult, again, when he acknowledges you take too many penalties. They played well in the second, had all the momentum, took too many penalties. Hard to win games in this league when you're in the box that much. Just full stop. Very well said there by Elias Lindholm. It was great to see him back. The Bruins had opportunities in the second period to get back in this one, to tie things up. Instead, take another penalty. Macklin Celebrini scores, and that was all the offense that San Jose needed in order to defeat the Boston Bruins last night. So the big storyline, too many penalties. Elias Lindholm acknowledging you got to get into a groove when you're coming back. It's hard to do that when you are taken out of your rhythm shift-wise, getting the penalty killers out there all the time. And the Bruins end up with only 2 points out of a possible 6 on this California road swing, which continues with a stop on Long Island later this week. Those points being left on the table is going to hurt them in the standings, and we've already seen them drop down a bit in terms of point percentage. We'll discuss Morgan Geekie's scoring, the stats and significance from these games over the weekend here as the podcast continues. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. Let's be real though, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress free. I use Game Time often for baseball tickets, looking at basketball tickets for my kid. I love their zone deals, which you just pick the section. Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. You get exactly what you see is what you pay. There's no hidden fees, and you can check out your view from your seat so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive at the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying hockey tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but that's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. As a reminder, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com and win $300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So the Bruins lost 2 of 3 in California. They scored 6 goals, 5 of which were scored by Morgan Geekie. Just unbelievable run that this guy is on. And one of the big storylines coming into this season was Boston potentially wasting another year of David Pastrnak's prime years. And now we're in danger of wasting some kind of found gold here in Morgan Geekie. I think it was Bobby Brewski on X who shared the post from the Seattle Kraken where they announced that they were not going to qualify Geeky, allowing him to become an unrestricted free agent. The Bruins jumped on that, believing that his per 60 rates in Seattle indicated a potential bump if he was given more of an opportunity. And I mean, what more could you ask for from a guy who has scored 17 goals so far this season, tied with the league leader in goals, who is Nathan MacKinnon? Just an unbelievable, we can't even call this a run here anymore. This is just Morgan Geekie perhaps showing us who he is. This run dates back to like last December. He was scratched very often by Jim Montgomery last season, and he was called out on social media. And ever since then, he has been absolutely on fire. If you go back to Thanksgiving 2024, you look at goals scored in the NHL over that span, Morgan Geekie ranks second in the NHL, only to Leon Draisaitl. He's now 2 goals ahead of David Pastrnak. And that's over a full 82 games here. That's a 82 game sample size since December 1st, or November 28th of 2024, I should say. 48 goals in 82 games. Only Leon Draisaitl, who's got 50 goals in his past 73 games over that span, has more. Now, the overall point total isn't there. He's got 27 assists. So he's got one of those Cy Young contending records of way more goals than assists. But still, just an unbelievable calendar year for this guy. Yes, his shooting percentage is elevated, 26.2%. Draisaitl, for comparison, is at 20.9. You have to go all the way down to John Tavares, who's got 41 goals since last Thanksgiving. He's at 21.4. 24%. Mark Scheifele, Tom Wilson, both over 20% in terms of shooting percentage. So it's somewhat unsustainable. But at the same time, Morgan Geekie is averaging far less ice time than most players on this list, the top goal scorers over the past calendar year. Leon Draisaitl, for example, getting 21 minutes and 55 seconds of ice time per game. Morgan Geekie, 17 minutes and 49 seconds. So that's a full 4 minutes less than Draisaitl, and he wasn't really on the top power play unit much last year as well, because that was a spot occupied, of course, by Brad Marchand. It's like 2.5 minutes fewer than David Pastrnak on average. The only player in the, well, there's nobody in the top 10 in goals over the last calendar year who has averaged fewer minutes per game than Morgan Geekie. Of course, that has risen this season, as Geekie is averaging so far, let's see here. Well, actually, no, 17 minutes and 43 seconds of ice time. This guy is averaging. So you compare that to Nathan MacKinnon, who's at 21:45, 4 minutes per game. On average, MacKinnon is out there compared to Morgan Geekie. You have Bo Horvat, Leon Draisaitl, Macklin Celebrini, all with 14 goals to sit second. They're all averaging over 20 minutes a game. Leon Draisaitl at 22:30. So it's pretty remarkable here what Geeky is doing, not just in terms of overall production, but also kind of those per 60 rates. He is not even getting 18 minutes per game of ice time. And again, going back to our conversation earlier, that's partly because the Bruins are so penalized. You're taking your best players off the ice by taking so many penalties, right? Like, you can't have Morgan Geekie, David Pastrnak out there in all situations. You have some penalty kill specialists, and if you're taking 6 penalties per game, then you're removing Geekie, Pastrnak from the ice, which is not great. Now, Pastrnak is getting more ice time on average than Geekie just because he is David Pastrnak and you want him out there as much as possible. But Morgan Geekie should be out there more often. And if he can continue to get a sustainable amount of shots on net or increase his shot volume, then this run could very well continue this season. And right now he is on pace for a somewhat mind-boggling 58 goals, 79 assists. 58 goals this guy is on pace for. Now, again, his shooting percentage is quite elevated this season. Like, we thought last season would be somewhat unsustainable at 22%. Right now he's at 26.2%, which is a full 10% over his career average. But if he gets even more ice time, that's more opportunities to get the puck on net and gives that sustainability factor a bit of a boost. Right now, he's averaging 9.2 shots on goal per 60, 3.2 points per 60, and if given more of an opportunity, that could rise a bit more if he gets some more ice time. But that involves the Bruins not taking so many penalties. So they need to be more disciplined so that their best players can be out on the ice more often than their penalty killers. Anyways, that's all to say. Morgan Geekie You're unbelievable. I'm so glad I traded for him in my salary cap keeper fantasy league. Now, I did trade him for Spencer Knight, who has been amazing for Chicago so far, Vezina Trophy candidate, but I'm getting the league leader in goals at a very nice salary. And I also have Leon Draisaitl. So fingers crossed for sustained success over the course of the season. Now, coming up, we're going to look at the significance of dropping 2 of 3 in California. Where does that place the Bruins in terms of the overall playoff picture? What does it mean for this team in terms of success this season? We'll take a look at that here as Locked On Boston Bruins continues. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Not just for the NBA either, you can get in on the action with the NHL and the NFL. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up today, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, now Thanksgiving is usually a barometer for where teams stand in relation to playoff projections. Right now, the NHL standings are so tightly packed that it's really hard to make some clear conclusions. There are, for example, in the Eastern Conference, only 2 teams currently below 500. Surprisingly, pretty good teams traditionally in the New York Rangers and the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are currently and kind of laughably last in the Eastern Conference. And don't forget, the Bruins have their first round pick, although it is protected. We can talk about that later on in the season. The Bruins right now have the second most points in the Atlantic Division, tied with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Ottawa Senators, and 1 point ahead of Montreal, 3 ahead of Florida, 4 ahead of Buffalo, still only 5 ahead of Toronto. Now, the problem is the Bruins have played 24 games, which is 2 to 3 more than anybody else in the division. So if you track it by points percentage, which is the percentage of points the Bruins have earned in relation to total points available, they're at 542 or 54.2% of those points available. And that is where we come back to points left on the table. You look at last night, basically a 1-goal game in San Jose. They lose 3-1, but there was an empty netter there. There was a real opportunity to get at least 1 point from San Jose. They got the 2 points in LA thanks to an overtime win, but they lost 4-3 in Anaheim, another game in which they should have squeezed out at least 1 point. So even those 2 points right there, you have a better point percentage and you are first place in the Atlantic just by pushing those 2 games to overtime. It's not even about wins or losses with the loser point. That's a situation they found themselves in earlier in the season when they were going through that lengthy losing streak early on, losing. Remember, they lost in regulation to the, who was it? San Jose Sharks? No, not the Vegas Golden Knights. They lost to early on by a goal. They lost to Utah by a goal. They lost to Florida by 1 goal. They lost to Tampa Bay by 1 goal. that 7-5 loss to the Anaheim Ducks as well. These are all games in which they could have accrued some points if they had just managed to push it to overtime, where they could have 3, 4, 5 more points just by way of losing, but getting it to overtime instead of these 1-goal decisions in regulation. Now, speaking of regulation, kind of mind-boggling, and I think it was Scott McLaughlin who pointed this out on X. The Bruins are the only team to beat the Colorado Avalanche in regulation this season, which is pretty wild. But all that to say, right now, the Bruins, 524 or 542 point percentage puts them 13th in the Eastern, 13th in the Eastern Conference, ahead of only Buffalo, the Rangers, and the Maple Leafs. So in order to get into that wild card conversation, they're really going to have to pick it up here and grab some more points. They're ahead of the Philadelphia Flyers, for example, when it comes to points. Philly's in the top wild card spot right now. Or actually, the Bruins are 1 point ahead of them for the first wild card spot, but Philly's played 4 fewer games. The Penguins, who are 1 point behind. The Canadiens, Blue Jackets, 1 point behind the Bruins, have played 2-3 games fewer than the Bruins. All the teams below them have played at least 2 or 3 fewer games, minus the Rangers, who are at 23 games played, which means the Bruins are in a good spot right now, but having left all those points on the table reduces their point percentage and gives the other teams an opportunity to catch up with the games that they have in hand. Now, those are only potential points. Those other teams have to win those games in order to make good on that. But the Bruins have put themselves behind, not only by constant stream to the penalty box, but by not getting those loser points, which help you in the standings. You can lose games and still gain points in the NHL. I don't love it. I'd go back to the tie myself, 10-minute overtime, then go to the tie. But that's how it is right now. And the Bruins, by way of losing all those games in regulation, have left points on the table that will be costly down the road. And yeah, they're injured. Elias Lindholm coming back, but Casey Mittelstadt, Victor Arvidsson still out. It increases the pressure on Pastrnak and Geeky, both of whom are performing at high levels. Geeky tied for the league lead in goals, but lack of depth is going to cost them as they are struggling to withstand the loss of McAvoy as well as those 2 forwards. Hopefully they're back soon and the Bruins can pick up some points here and remain in the playoff mix. That's if you want them to be, or if you're on team load up on assets, trade Zacha, trade Mittelstadt, conversation for another day. As it stands, this Bruins roster, somewhat depleted. Matej Blumel sitting out in order to make room for Lindholm coming back. Mittelstadt, Arvidsson, we'd like to see them back soon. It was a decent game for Jeremy Swayman, whose birthday it is today. Happy birthday, Sway. And thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. We are available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please do subscribe if you have not done so already. For your second listen, check out Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. You can find it on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you again here tomorrow on a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.